Hey there, I'm Brandon, and this is the Dirt Church Devotional. So in Mark chapter 8, starting in verse 22, there is this really kind of a crazy story about Jesus healing a blind guy. Now, Jesus healed a lot of people. In fact, there's a lot of blind people. There's 8 different accounts of different people being healed of blindness. And then there's 2 other accounts, like in the feeding of the 4,000, the feeding of the 5,000, where it says they brought the sick and the blind and Jesus healed them all. But this one is unique. And it says a couple things. Jesus went to Bethsaida and some people brought a blind man to him. Jesus took the man by the hand and took him away from the crowd. Then it says that he spit on his eyes and touched him and asked him, he says, how is it? What do you see? And the guy opens his eyes and says, well, I see people, but they look like trees walking around. And then Jesus touched him again and healed him completely. And so this is the only time in Scripture where it took Jesus more than one attempt to bring a total healing. It's the only time where he spit in somebody's eyes. I mean, he had spit before and made mud, but this time it says he spit in his eyes. But there's a couple of things, a couple of really important takeaways I want to submit to you today. Number 1, it says that Jesus took him by the hand and took him away from the crowds. It is so important for us to be able to get away with Jesus. It's so important for us to be able to get away from the hustle and bustle of the busyness of life. You know, even when we're at church, we can be so caught up with catching up with friends. We can be so caught up with, the things that we have, the role that maybe we're taking up the offering or we're wanting to give an offering, or maybe we're involved in the worship team or whatever. We're a greeter. We got things to do. We're thinking about what we're doing afterwards. With our phones, we can get so caught up with Instagram and Facebook and YouTube and all these different things. We got the internet, we got television, we got 24/7 everything. We get so busy. It's so important for us to get away with Jesus. Just go away with him. Just take some time, separate yourself from people, separate yourself from the busyness of life, and just spend some time with Jesus. Now, get this, the time that Jesus spent with this guy, it's going to take you less than 3 minutes to read the whole passage. Maybe he spent 15, 20 minutes. It doesn't have to be a long time, but it's got to be quality time. God's more concerned about quality than he is about quantity. Okay, so that's number 1. Get away with Jesus. Number 2, don't put God in a box. I'm sure you've heard this umpteen times, but don't put God in a box. There were several different ways that Jesus had healed people of blindness, from speaking over them, to touching them, to making mud and telling them to go wash their eyes, to now spitting in this guy's eyes. So many different ways that Jesus did healings and Jesus delivered people. So I would challenge you, I'd encourage you, don't put God in a box. Just because God moved a certain way for somebody else doesn't mean he's going to move that way for you. Also, just because he moved for you a certain way doesn't mean that that's the way he's going to move for everybody else. Don't put him in a box. He is far too creative to be stuck doing things the same way all the time. And then finally, and this is my favorite one, don't settle for better when best is on the table. Jesus touched the guy, he spit in his eyes, he touched the guy, and he asked him, how is it? And the guy opened his eyes and he could see. He was better. He could see, but people looked like trees walking around. He was better, but he knew there was more available. Instead of just saying, oh, hey, that's better, that's good, I can go on now. I can at least, not run into walls and things. He said, well, it's better, but it's not best. How many times do we settle for better when there's best on the table? Let me challenge you with this. If you've been praying about something, you've been praying for something, for somebody, and you haven't got an absolute no, then there's something else on the table. Keep pressing in. Now, Paul prayed 3 times that God would take the thorn from his side. He got an absolute no, and so he said, all right, you know what? I'll boast about my weakness, because when I'm weak, then he's strong. But if you don't get an absolute no, that means that there may be more on the table. You just need to keep pressing in. Be honest with God and say, well, it's better, but I want more. All right, chew on that. We'll talk to you next time.